30% below retail. New, in the box, tags still on. That's a Zenith Defy Skyline right now, a watch with one of the finest chronograph movements ever built, sitting on a dealer's shelf at a third off, unworn. Another watch on this list was bought by dealers at $20,000 and can't find a buyer at $13,000. And the one at number 1 is a steel Patek Philippe, where dealers are sitting on $15,000 of loss per watch. Steel Patek. That sentence would have been fiction 3 years ago. These are 12 watches dealers cannot move in 2026. And this matters to you directly, whether you're buying or already own one. Because when a watch stops moving, 3 things happen. The price you paid stops matching what it's worth, the discount you can negotiate goes up, and the dealer who once wouldn't return your call suddenly wants to talk. Some of these are genuinely superb watches. That's not the point. The point is what the market is doing to them. No brand loyalty here, and nobody is paying me to say any of this. Let's start at 12. Number 12, Zenith Defy Skyline Blue. Zenith makes El Primero, 136 years old, one of the greatest mechanical chronograph calibers ever made. That's not marketing, that's horological fact. The Defy Skyline launched in 2021 to real excitement. Sharp integrated case, that star-shaped rotor visible through the dial, and about $6,000, which felt almost reasonable for what you got. For 18 months, it worked. Collectors who couldn't get Royal Oaks were curious. Then LVMH pushed volume, more units, more retailers, more availability. By 2024, you could walk into a dealer almost anywhere in Europe and buy one, and that's the trap. In watches, widely available means the premium evaporates overnight. Someone who paid $6,000 in 2022 gets about $4,000 today. Dealers who stocked up expecting the Royal Oak alternative trade to last are looking at trays of blue dials nobody's picking up. The movement is still brilliant. The market doesn't care. Once a watch is everywhere, it stops being anyone's status piece. And in this industry, that's the only thing that actually sells. 11. Panerais Luminor Marina 44 mm Panerais Luminor Marina 44 mm. Panerai built its name on one idea. Huge, Italian, military-descended cushion cases that looked pulled out of the Adriatic. For 2 decades, that idea printed money. The problem is, the people who loved it in 2004 are now in their 50s, and the people buying watches now want 38, 39 millimeters. Clean dials. Something that disappears under a cuff instead of announcing itself across a restaurant. Here's the number. Dealers who bought 44mm Panerais during the hype years at $20,000 cannot find buyers at $13,000. Long-term owners are calling dealers expecting 2021 valuations and getting laughed off the phone. And to be fair to Panerai, they responded, the 38mm Luminor Do is genuinely good. But the gray market is still full of the classics, and someone has to absorb them. If you actually want a big Panerai, this is the best buying window in 15 years. That's not a joke. That's what a dealer's problem looks like from the other side of the counter. Panerai built its name on one idea. Huge, Italian, military-descended cushion cases that looked pulled out of the Adriatic. For 2 decades, that idea printed money. The problem is, the people who loved it in 2004 are now in their 50s, and the people buying watches now want 38, 39 millimeters. Clean dials. Something that disappears under a cuff instead of announcing itself across a restaurant. Here's the number. Dealers who bought 44mm Panerais during the hype years at $20,000 cannot find buyers at $13,000. Long-term owners are calling dealers expecting 2021 valuations and getting laughed off the phone. And to be fair to Panerai, they responded, the 38mm Luminor Do is genuinely good. But the gray market is still full of the classics, and someone has to absorb them. If you actually want a big Panerai, this is the best buying window in 15 years. That's not a joke. That's what a dealer's problem looks like from the other side of the counter. Number 10. IWC Big Pilot 46mm Heritage. Let's be honest first. The 43mm Big Pilot saved this line. IWC read the market, made a wearable version, and it sells. The original 46 is a different story. Trade-in values have dropped hard. Owners who bought at peak call dealers expecting 12 to 13,000. Dealers offer 8, sometimes less, and walk away when the answer is no. Those watches go home, go back in the box, and become a problem the owner doesn't know how to solve. And here's the honest observation underneath it. Watch values don't track quality or rarity. They track consensus, the collective agreement that a thing is desirable. The 46mm Big Pilot had that consensus from about 2010 to 2020. Then it moved somewhere else, the way a conversation at a party shifts, and suddenly you're talking to nobody. The watch didn't change. The room did. 9. Hublot Big Bang Unico, precious metals. Hublot was always loud. That was the point. Jean-Claude Beaver built the brand on the idea that luxury could be aggressive. For a decade, that customer existed in enormous numbers. By 2026, that customer has moved on or is buying vintage. The precious metal Big Bangs retail between $45,000 and well over $100,000 depending on configuration. A yellow gold Unico that retailed at $70,000 can be found on the gray market at $45 to $50. Some configurations are worse. The quiet luxury shift hit watches around 2023. Understated. Nothing that announces itself before you enter the room. The Big Bang was specifically engineered to announce itself before you entered the room. That used to be the attraction. Now, it's the problem. 8. Bell & Ross BR5. I want to be clear. The BRZ05 is a well-made watch. This isn't about quality. Bell & Ross spent years as an aviation brand, and then made a play for the integrated bracelet conversation that Royal Oak and Nautilus defined. The problem is that category is brutally hierarchical. If it isn't a Royal Oak, a Nautilus, or a Vacheron overseas, the buyer at $5,000 and up starts asking uncomfortable questions. Who made this? What does it say about me? Will it hold value? On that last one, the BRZ05 answers honestly, probably not. Gray market premiums from 2021 are gone entirely. You can find them at or below retail without much searching. For a brand trying to establish itself in a prestige category, below retail on the gray market is roughly the worst signal available. And here's the harder truth. The buyers who drove that segment between 2020 and 2022 were partly collectors and partly speculators. When speculators exit, prices don't normalize. They overcorrect because suddenly there's real supply and the organic buyer base is smaller than anyone assumed. It was never in demand. It was in a slipstream, and slipstreams end. 7. Omega Seamaster Diver, 300 meet, Sedna, gold. The steel Seamaster is one of the best-selling watches in the world. Nobody's worried about that watch. But Omega has a habit. They produce limited and special editions of the same watch in precious metals at prices floating between $25,000 and $55,000. And at that number, the Omega name doesn't carry the gravity it does at $3,000. At $50,000, buyers start comparing the Seamaster to a steel Submariner, which costs less and holds value better, or to a precious metal Rolex, which commands secondary respect at that tier. The Sedna Gold Seamaster falls awkwardly between them. One gray market dealer reported his Sedna inventory sitting 4 times longer than his steel pieces. He'd stopped ordering them. That's not a product failure. It's a positioning failure. And positioning failures are slower to fix because you can't redesign your way out. You have to wait for the market to reassign your value, and markets are stubborn about that. Quick one before the top 6, because that's where the real damage is. Hit like and subscribe. Costs nothing, and it helps this reach somebody about to spend serious money on something they'd struggle to sell. 6. Girard Perregaux, Laureato, steel blue. In 2022, the Laureato answered the question everyone was asking. What do I buy when I can't get a Nautilus? Beautiful octagonal bezel, integrated bracelet, proper in-house movement, and about $12,000 at retail. Collectors were paying $20, $22, $25 on the gray market. Then something happened that killed its entire reason for existing. Royal Oaks started appearing in boutiques. Not for everyone, not easily, but for preferred clients, they became obtainable in 2024 and 2025 in a way they hadn't been for years. The moment the actual thing becomes accessible, the substitute loses its entire premium. Gray market Laureatos, trading at $25,000, fell back below retail. Not slowly, fast. Dealers who'd paid 18 or 20 couldn't sell at 12. And here's the observation that cuts sharper than the price. The Laureato was never being bought for what it was. It was being bought for what it wasn't. That's a fragile foundation. You're not buying the thing. You're buying the absence of something else. And the moment that something else shows up, you own a watch instead of a position. Number 5. Breitling Chronomat. Bezo 1, 42, full gold. The Bezo 1 is legitimately one of the finest chronograph calibers made anywhere. Breitling engineering isn't the issue. The issue is price, and what price means when you're not Rolex. The full gold Chronomat launched at a retail approaching $40,000. At that number, the buyer isn't shopping in Breitling territory. They're comparing against a steel Daytona, a Royal Oak chronograph, a Nautilus chrono, all of which hold value dramatically better. Dealers report gold chronomats sitting over 200 days on Chrono 24, in a market where anything people actually want moves in under 2 weeks. Here's what Breitling underestimated, and it's the most useful lesson in this whole video. They looked at Rolex charging $30,000 for a steel Daytona and concluded correctly that customers would pay serious money for a sport chronograph. What they missed is that it wasn't that customers would pay $30,000 for a sport chrono. It was that customers would pay $30,000 for that sport chrono. Brand cachet at that tier isn't transferable. Rolex's pricing tells you about Rolex. It tells you nothing about what you can charge. And some dealers have moved to discounting these privately. Not on Chrono 24, where a public price drop signals weakness to every future buyer, but through quiet conversations with regular clients. That's how you know it's genuinely uncomfortable. When discounting goes underground, the panic is real. 4. Rolex Sky Dweller, two-tone Rolesaur. Saying a Rolex is in trouble feels like a contradiction. Rolex doesn't have trouble. Rolex is the market, except the two-tone Sky Dweller is sitting on gray dealer shelves below its January 2026 retail. The Rolesaur version has a 2026 MSRP pushed to around $20,500 after Rolex's January increases. Secondary market, roughly $18,500, sometimes less. That gap, $2,000 of immediate loss the moment a dealer sells it, is the panic. The all-steel Sky Dweller holds value better. The full gold holds value at a different tier. Two-tone occupies the awkward middle. Expensive enough to price out the budget-conscious Rolex buyer, not prestigious enough for the buyer who wants full precious metal at that level. Rolex raised prices. The secondary market didn't follow. Dealers are stuck between a manufacturer's floor and a market that won't meet it. Number 3. Rolex Sea Dweller. Deep Sea, Ref 136660. The most extreme production watch Rolex makes. Water resistant to 3,900 meters. A depth no human has ever worn a watch to. A helium escape valve for saturation divers who will never buy this at retail. A case that stands almost 2 centimeters off your wrist. At a 2026 retail of approximately $14,500, the Deep Sea asks you to pay for capabilities you'll never use, in a format that's become harder to wear as the culture pivots towards slim and vintage proportioned. Dealers aren't panicking at the level of the gold pieces higher on this list, but it's moving noticeably slower than the standard Sea Dweller or the Submariner, and the gray market premiums that existed 2 years ago have gone flat. Listings sitting 60, 90, 120 days. The honest version, the Deep Sea, was always niche. It sold during the hype years because everything Rolex sold during the hype years. Now that buyers are choosing deliberately, survives a depth that would kill everything else on Earth, turns out not to be a strong lifestyle argument. 2. Audemars Piguet, code 1159, steel chronograph. In 2019, AP launched a watch the internet actively hated on arrival. The code 1159 was supposed to answer the question, what do you make after the Royal Oak? The answer was a circular case, inside an octagonal middle case, inside a round bezel. A design that looked like three watches assembled by people who never agreed on the concept. The steel chronograph retails at about $28,800. Secondary, somewhere between $18,000 and $22,000. A 30% loss the moment it leaves the boutique isn't a correction. That's a verdict. And here's what makes it genuinely strange. AP has improved the watch meaningfully since 2019. Better finishing, reshaped case, dial textures that are actually beautiful in person. Technically, it's a more accomplished watch today than at launch. The market doesn't care, because the market already decided. The real damage came from how AP boutiques used it as a gatekeeping tool. If you wanted a Royal Oak, you had to buy a code first. That created an enormous pool of unworn codes from collectors who bought purely to satisfy the boutique relationship and immediately listed them. Chrono 24 has hundreds at any moment, new, unworn, below retail, which tells every buyer the watch doesn't hold value, which ensures it doesn't. They weren't losing buyers. They were losing buyers who told other buyers to stay away. Number 1. Patek Philippe 5905 1A Olive Green. Steel Patek Philippe. Let those three words sit. For most of watch collecting history, steel Patek was the closest thing the hobby had to a guaranteed outcome. You bought it. It appreciated. The 5711 Nautilus was the canonical example. Waitlists of years. Secondary premiums of 3 or 4 times retail. The 5905 1A is a steel annual calendar chronograph with an olive green dial. In 2021, the most fashionable color in watch collecting. Current 2026 retail, approximately $72,000. Secondary market, about $65,000. Dealers who bought at the peak, when green dials commanded premiums, and this traded above retail, are sitting on losses in the region of $15,000 per unit. A $15,000 loss on a steel Patek. Say that to someone who watched this market between 2018 and 2021, and they will genuinely not believe you. Several forces compound. The olive green craze ran out faster than anyone predicted. The 42mm case, which felt right in 2020, now reads large against a market that swung decisively to 38 and 39. And Patek's own price increases pushed MSRP above what the secondary market would pay for something it already had in oversupply. And here's the observation I keep coming back to. The 5905 isn't a bad watch. It's a genuinely brilliant piece of horology with one of the finest annual calendar mechanisms ever put in a steel case. None of that helped, because in 2026, the watch market isn't evaluating horology. It's evaluating liquidity. A watch that might be worth $60,000 in 2 years is only worth $60,000 today if someone believes in that 2-year outcome. When the market loses faith in the trajectory, the watch becomes what it always technically was, a beautiful, complicated, extremely expensive steel object that tells you the time, the date, the month, and the day. That's extraordinary. It's just not enough on its own to hold $72,000 in a market that's become suspicious of everything. Why all of this at once? It isn't 12 separate stories. The panic of 2026 isn't about bad watches. Every watch here is technically accomplished, and several are brilliant. The panic is about something simpler and more brutal. The difference between what a dealer paid and what a buyer will offer. For 3 years, that gap didn't exist. Dealers were order takers. Everything moved. The collector who could actually buy at retail was doing the boutique a favor by showing up. Now, the favor runs the other way. And dealers are remembering what it feels like to actually need to sell something. Look at what the 12 have in common. Oversized cases in a market that shrank. Precious metals from brands whose names don't carry at that tier. Watches bought as substitutes for something scarcer that stopped being scarce. And price increases that outran what the secondary market would bear. What that means for you. 3 things. First, if you're buying, this is the best negotiating position in 15 years. Every watch on this list is a dealer's problem. Walk in knowing that, and don't accept the first number. Second, if you own one, understand what you're holding. Not worthless, just illiquid. The difference matters. A watch that will eventually find a buyer at a fair price is a different problem from a watch losing value every month. Most of these are the first kind. And third, check how long a listing has been sitting before you buy. Chrono24 shows it. Anything people actually want moves in under 2 weeks. If a reference has been listed 60, 90, 200 days, that's the market telling you something the price tag isn't. Right, 3 quick things. Tell me in the comments which of these 12 you actually own. And be honest about whether you've looked up what it's worth lately. I want to know who's sitting on one of these, and if you bought any of them recently. What discount did you actually get? That's real market data, and it's worth more to the next person than anything I can read off a listing. If this was useful, hit like. It decides whether this reaches somebody standing in a boutique this weekend. And subscribe. No brand sponsorships, no press samples, no being nice to a manufacturer because they sent me something in a box. Right? That's your lot. The market isn't buying horology anymore. It's buying liquidity.